Despite the rumors and speculation, I think one thing is starting to be clear. Nobody really knows what the Chicago Bulls are going to do at the trade deadline. That's a good thing, and it could be a bad thing. We're going to talk about both of those outcomes on today's episode. We're also going to talk about trade ideas from a Bleacher Nation article written by Elias Schuster. We'll talk about all that plus more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. I want to start off talking about this. Nobody knows what the Bulls are doing at the trade deadline. When you listen and go to all the NBA experts, even Mark Stein, Jake L. Fisher, whoever you're looking at, right? There's one commonality between all of them, right? Is that the Bulls, even K.C. Johnson, we talked about a K.C. Johnson, report yesterday in which he said the Bulls are open for business, that they want to make a trade. Nobody knows what this Bulls team is doing. Now, for some Bulls fans, that adds to the frustration of this team not really having a direction, right? Still trying to live in two worlds, that they're not doing either one in a really good way, right? They aren't developing extremely well when you look at Dalen and Julian, even Modest Bucelis. Yeah, these guys are getting some minutes, but when you look at them and you watch the minutes and watch them play, it's not really like Billy Donovan has a development path or plan for them. They're kind of just out there at times, right? Trying to, and again, I know we have a read and react, high pace offense that's built around three-pointers, but when you look at like some of the other, rookies in this class, I think specifically, especially with the recent rise of Khalil Ware, who, is really playing a lot of heavy minutes now and thriving for that team. But earlier in the season, when he was getting 12, 14 minutes, even with those minutes, you saw how Eric Spoelstra was getting him to work on certain things and aspects of his game. He was actually still part of the game plan in those 12 or 14 minutes. Whereas now with the Chicago Bulls, you look at Julian Phillips, who's averaged about 14 minutes per game this season for the Chicago Bulls. You look at Dalen Terry, who's gotten pretty consistent minutes this season for the first time in his NBA career, playing pretty consistently. But what would you say is the development for those guys? Now, I know some of my more pessimistic Bulls fans are going to say, well, those guys don't have any real skills, any specific skills, so it's hard to develop them. And I'll respond to that with the point of development is to get them to work on things, to put them into places and things. And it seems like, at least by my estimation and how I view it, is that Billy Donovan kind of more so has those guys playing minutes and, hey, go out there and show me something. And it's like, okay, that's cool and all, make no mistake about it. But when you look at how Spo used Khalil Ware, and I'm just using that for an example, it was really kind of more focused. And I think that's where the Bulls have fallen short in development. That's why they have a whole development department. But then you flip that around and take a look at the competing part of the Bulls, right? We're having great seasons, great, amazing seasons by Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine. I want to make sure that I keep highlighting that. Your vets that are supposed to be your number one and your number two are having great seasons. Before all that greatness in that season, the Chicago Bulls have 19 wins. They are on pace to win 35 games. Right, despite those great seasons from the veterans. So then you still look at the front office, and if your job or your desire is to compete now, you haven't necessarily surrounded those players with the best opportunity to put them in a place to really fight. And I've said this before, you look at where this team is at the bottom, fighting for the 10th seed. That's it, fighting for the 10th seed. They are surrounded by the Miami Heat that their whole season because of Jimmy Butler could be in turmoil, and the Philadelphia 76ers, who have been an utter disappointment this season, right? You see those two things, and that's the teams that the Bulls are surrounded by. They're much more like those teams than even they are like the Orlando Magic that have fallen to the 8th seed, because we know they once they're back healthy, that defense is going to be legit. The Detroit Pistons are on the rise, up 7-3 in their last 10, right? So the Bulls are very more close to the bottom than they are even the true middle, and that's just the reality of it. So this team still sits in a place where, yeah, okay, cool. So the fact that the Bulls really have, like, nobody knows what they're doing leading into this trade deadline, or really what their even goal is for the season, much less the trade deadline. Nobody really knows what the Bulls are going to accomplish this season because, I mean, it could go wildly any vast different ways. Don't let an injury come, because then the Chicago Bulls are going to be torpedoed, right? But then on the flip side of that, right, if you want to look at it and pull some positive out of that, if nobody knows what the Bulls are doing, it does lend itself for the people who are more optimistic to say, well, the Bulls could do something surprising. They could pull a rabbit out of their hat, and they could do something that, to pick a direction, whether it's competing or not. The Bulls do have assets, some. They don't have the great amount of assets when you look at some of the other teams around the NBA, but when you factor in that no deal has really been moved above $20 million, the Bulls have a $17 million trade player exception if they want to use it, which would then, again, send them to the luxury tax. So that's more than likely not going to happen, right? Very, very rare. If Jerry Reinsdorfer said that he'll pay for a team that can compete, even though AK said that he has the okay from ownership to go into the luxury tax, I don't believe that. But, for those, like I said, they were talking about the optimistic Bulls fan side. For those that do have that optimism, cool, great, whatever it is, right? But the Bulls still sit in this place where if they wanted to try to make something happen, they could. They have the contracts to make something happen. They don't really have the first round picks due to the way that the protection on the Spurs picks works, that even if it's that, though it's likely to convey in whatever year, because it has protections for the next 3 years, the Bulls can't trade any of those 3 picks, of course, and then they can't trade the first year after those picks in, which the protection is in 2028. So we're looking at the Bulls can't move their own pick into 2030 or 2029, 30, somewhere up in there. And so, they don't really have the first round picks they can go. So if they want to make a move, it's going to have to come via them moving one of their other players. We do have $9 million beneath the first tax apron still left remaining, which could make them a buyout candidate, which could make them, they could take $9 million back more than they send out and still be okay there, right? Without getting into the luxury tax. So the Bulls do have that buffer built in, and it could lead them. And I like to trust that AK and Eversley, when they were crafting this and maneuvering the salary cap, that if this team did exceed expectations, they left a little bit there so they could add a buyout. So they could absorb a contract if needed, right? But then again, is that likely? That's the question. They are hard capped. They did hard cap themselves, but they have that $9.5 million beneath the first tax apron that they can take back if they choose to do so. So that's where the Bulls sit right now. And that place, like I said, whether you're pessimistic or optimistic, you have things that you can look at and say, well, this may be a good thing because of this. This may be a bad thing because of this. But I think overall, and the thing that keeps being loud with this Bulls team is just the fact that, not just not knowing, saving your hands, right? Not showing your hand in the sense of and maneuvering is a good tactic, right? But when you look aimless, that's not. And that's why you see some of the things, and even the Bulls' inability to pull the trigger on some of these trades, because teams around the league are looking at the Bulls via what they've done in the past and how they look inept right now, and hoping and wishing that they can take advantage of what the Chicago Bulls team is going to do. That just is what it is, right? And so we sit in the same place where there is no clear path forward. There's no one direction that is more likely than other, despite what the tanking fans would have you say is the fact that, yeah, unfortunately with this front office, even if they did get a top 10 pick, I mean, I don't necessarily have the most trust in them to get it right. I would like to think in this deep draft that they can, and I want them to get it right. But then there's still that concern as well. Will they even get this right, even if they do keep the pick, right? And then for my anti-tankers, my anti-takers, it's just like, they don't want to see this team be bad. They don't want to see this team lose games. And usually my response to them is, do you like what you're seeing right now? Right? Because without a clear step forward or a clear step back to try to improve either through the draft or gaining players or gaining assets or adding players to this team, I mean, we're still losing. We're losing at a fairly high rate. And that's why I've recently balked back at the fact that anybody who says the Bulls are a middle of the pack team, there are 15 teams in the Eastern Conference. 15. It used to be if you were in the middle of the pack, that 7th or 8th seed, you were making the playoffs, and then you got to decide your direction in it. The 10th seed is not the middle of the pack. I hate to tell y'all that. It's not the middle of the pack. It's just not. Either way that you look at it, the Bulls are towards the bottom of the Eastern Conference, and then they have the 9th worst record in the league. They're in the bottom of the league. The Bulls aren't in the middle. Like, this is why, like, and again, now I was saying the middle too until recently when I looked at it and I was like, wait a second. I'm not going to keep being bought into this playing shit being the middle. It's not the middle. It's not the middle. You're not in the middle. We are not in the middle of nothing unless you're talking about in the middle of ass. That's the only place that we are right now. This team is not in the middle. This team is in the bottom. They're in the bottom of the Eastern Conference. They're towards the bottom. They're, of course, not the very bottom, but they're towards the bottom of the Eastern Conference, and they're definitely towards the bottom of the league. So for my people who say, I don't want to see this team lose, I don't want to, you're seeing it. It's in front of you right now. It's adamantly in front of you. If the season ended right now, yeah, sure, they'd get a play-in game, but they have the 9th worst record in the league. That's the bottom, y'all. That's the bottom. And so for those fans that are holding on so tight to, I don't want to see this team be bad. What do you think we're seeing? Yes, we're seeing great performances from Zach and from Vooch. We're seeing Lonzo Ball have what is a comeback season, and it's a great story. We're seeing flashes from Aya when he's been healthy, flashes from Coby. It's good to see flashes from Elias Vucevic, but the team overall, we're losing, y'all. We're losing. And it doesn't seem like the winning is coming anytime soon, and that's why yeah, cool. You can try to sell me on nobody knows what this Bulls team is doing, so let's wait and see. Yeah, we're going to have to wait and see regardless. We can't fast forward unless one of y'all got the remote from the Adam Sandler movie. We can't fast forward and know what the hell is going to happen. But all we can do is try to read the tea leaves and see where this team is going to be. And let's hope that AK and Eversley got something cooked up or something planned, because if they don't, we're going to be here where we are right now for a considerable amount of time. But with that said, of course, it is trade season. We're only a couple of weeks away from the NBA trade deadline, which is then going to, I think it's still going to disappoint. I still think we're not going to see very many trades, but there's an article over for Bleacher Nation. This one's written by Elias Schuster, in which he has 3 realistic trade ideas for the Chicago Bulls. And we want to go through that real quick. This first trade is the Bulls trading with the Warriors so they can finally get Nikola Vucevic. We'd be sending Vooch to the Warriors. In exchange, we'd be getting Kevon Looney, Gary Payton II, Lindy Waters the third, and a 2026 first-round pick. Now, as many people know, that the Bulls do not have any open roster spots. So, unfortunately, we cannot take back 3 players for 1 player. Now, the protected 2026 pick, cool, you can sell me on that. That's going to be another deep draft. If we can get another pick, I do think the Warriors are always going to be a team that are kind of around the area where they're going to be in the play-in or playoff, unless they dramatically choose to go a different direction with their roster. Yes, right now they are the 11th seed and out the play-in this year's draft. This year's standing so far, but there's still a lot of time left. And technically they have a tied record with the Phoenix Suns. So we'll see how that goes. Now, this trade gets the Bulls what they reportedly covet for Nikola Vucevic, and that's a first-round pick. Taking outside how else you would have to figure out what's going on with this roster. And again, I know people are going to say, well, this trade doesn't make us better. I'm telling y'all what right now, and people need to get this in their head. There's not a single trade for Nikola Vucevic that makes the Chicago Bulls a better team. That's just not the market that we're in. If we're trading Vooch, it means that we can get a player that has like Kevon Looney has a different skill set. We can get that first-round pick, but you're not going to become some better team. It's not going to solidify your chances to move from 10 to number 8, for example. So that is really what this team covets in that trade potentially. And again, it can't happen because of the 3 players coming back and only 1 player being sent out. Even if you did add in a player at a vet minimum like Torrey Craig, which maybe the Warriors would be interested in as having a role player if they're adding Nikola Vucevic, it doesn't work out then in balance. So the Bulls would have to figure out a different kind of combination or a third team to get involved in a move like this. But in this, it sends Nikola Vucevic to a destination that reportedly has wanted him, coveted him for a couple of weeks now, and the Bulls get what they want, and that's an additional first-round pick next season, in which they could lose their first-round pick to the Spurs. The second trade here by Elias Schuster is that the Bulls do a trade with the Rockets, sending Lonzo Ball to the Houston Rockets in exchange for Deshaun Tate, Jeff Green, and 2 second-round picks, 1 in 2026, 1 in 2027. Now, this is, again, Elias Schuster's doing a good job at using the reported desire and what the team would want back for Lonzo. Lonzo, I think, fits in with Ime Udoka, right? And Elias Schuster points this out in his analysis in this as well. I think he fits in. He can give them a different guard to be out there other than Fred VanVleet. And also he just like Lonzo with those young players that they have there in Houston and being able to run and get those guys the ball, even feed off with his 3-point shooting to give them a little bit and provide them a little bit more spacing. I love the fit for Houston, but then again, the Bulls can't take back 2 players and only send out 1. The 2 second-round picks are what the Bulls reportedly coveted for Lonzo Ball, but like I said, we can't necessarily take those 2 players back, so we'd either have to eat the cost of waiving somebody, which still counts against your salary cap, or we'd have to find a third team to reroute one of those guys too. But, I mean, when you look at the players involved in this, neither one of the players, Jeff Green's a vet, right? I mean, you're adding a vet, a forward there. Deshaun Tate is he's 29 years old. He's a 6'4" guard with a 6'8" wingspan. I mean, I know he plays mainly small forward for that team, but I don't know, man. I listen, again, the players aren't necessarily the goal and the focus here. It's kind of more so the picks. And I know a lot of Bulls fans want to see Lonzo Ball return here. I get it. And I understand it too. Lonzo's been playing really good. He has a positive impact when he's on the court. But again, if the Bulls know that they aren't going to re-sign Lonzo, then to me, it'd be smart to go ahead and move him. If they know that. Now, of course, we'll never know that. And Bulls fans are going to react and be pissed off if it goes through and it ends up happening where the Bulls trade Lonzo Ball. The Bulls fans are going to be, the majority of Bulls fans are going to be mad. But I think when it comes down to it, if you're trying to get something back for a player that you know that in your heart of hearts you don't plan on bringing back and re-signing here, I really can't fault you when it comes down to it. I can't fault you when it comes down to that, right? The next trade, and this one is one that gets quite interesting here. So this is a 3-team trade between the Nets, the Magic, and the Chicago Bulls, in which the Bulls send out Coby White and Torrey Craig to the Orlando Magic. The Brooklyn Nets get Cole Anthony from the Magic, and the Chicago Bulls get DeAnthony Melton, Caleb Houston, a 2025 first-round pick from the Magic, 2028 first-round pick, top 3 protector from the Magic, a 2025 second-round pick from the Nets, and a 2028 second-round pick from the Nets. Now, this is a trade that is allowable per what, again, how the Bulls have to send out as many players as they receive. The Bulls then also get 2 first-round picks back in this. This is, and Elias Schuster points out that this is the least realistic trade of all these that he talks about, right? But I think in that the Bulls getting back 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks to kind of restock some of their draft assets that they've lost. But then again, you're losing Coby White, a young player who's grown and developed on your team. We talked yesterday on the live stream about how the new CBA rule could make it more difficult for the Chicago Bulls to re-sign Coby White. For those that don't know, in the new CBA, you can re-sign players up to 140% of their contract now, but you have to have cap space to get that done. So if the Bulls want to extend Coby White, right, before allowing him to become an unrestricted free agent, it can get pretty costly for the Chicago Bulls. And so they may not want to run the risk of him going into unrestricted free agency. Again, you guys know how I feel about trading Coby. But it's just a reality that it's something that the Bulls may have to look at. That is why, for those that the Bulls could be looking to make some cost-saving moves in other places to start preparing themselves for the extensions to Coby or Io. And so that's where it comes down to, right? And so because Coby and Io signed very team-friendly deals, a contract extension may be unlikely for them because they can get more by being unrestricted free agents and re-signing with the Bulls as unrestricted free agents. That's if that's even the goal. I'm sure them and their agents are going to use the next year to do information gathering, but that's the new CBA rule. That's why it can get very interesting for the Chicago Bulls in trying to keep these guys on this roster, because if they hit unrestricted free agency, you have to have the cap space to re-sign them if you're going to give them those huge extensions. Otherwise, it's 140%, which because Coby and Io signed very reasonable contracts at $12 million for Coby, and I think $6-8 million for Io, it could be, especially depending on how the next 2 seasons ends for those guys, could be more effective for them to go ahead and go into unrestricted free agency. So that's what they're trying to take advantage of in this deal. But like I said, Elias Schuster does point out that is the most unrealistic trade of all of these. What does all this kind of point to me? This points to me that if the Bulls, and this kind of goes back to the fact that the Bulls probably aren't going to be very active sellers at the trade deadline. And the reason why I say that, if the Bulls wanted to be that, to me, they wouldn't have a fully 15-man roster where all the contracts are guaranteed. And the reason why I say that is because then they don't have the ability to cut anybody, to create an open roster spot to absorb more back. That's the place where the Bulls have kind of failed themselves if they really want to be active at this trade deadline. In a kind of a way, they've added more restrictions to the moves that they can make by having a roster where everybody's contract is fully guaranteed. And that's the place that this team sits in, that it's now questionable on, all right, what is the future going to look like for the Bulls? So we'll see. Again, much like the Chicago Bears coaching search, I'm kind of tired of talking about trades, but you kind of have to, because leading into this, it's everybody's wondering what the Bulls are going to do. And it's up to the Bulls to add and provide that clarity for what they're going to do with their roster. And so we'll see. We'll see. If any clarity comes, I still think the most likely thing is no moves happen, but we'll see. But thank you guys for tuning in for today. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.